Hey, it's Juck.
And I don't think he's going to throw the ball as much as he thinks he's going to throw the ball now that Chip Kelly's on board. And I'm happy about that. More quarterback.
The truth is, Ryan Day has made a change philosophically, but it's none of those.
You all know who wins. LSU is the drunkest fan base in the country.
And welcome to Juckonbucks College Football Show on a Tuesday. Appreciate you all so much for joining me today. I do, however, have some bad news this morning. While it technically is this morning, it's 1 a.m. for me, 9:30 for you when this is airing. I'll not be able to answer you today in the chat on the air, but I will pop in and answer you with my thumbs. We can chop it up a bit there. The reason I'm recording this is because I'm bored. It's that simple. I've been doing my notes and I'm like, you know what? I just feel like talking because I got so much on my mind about this week, about this game, about the current state of the Buckeyes, of the Ducks, of college football in general at the top. And I just want to talk about it. There are so many implications for this Ohio State-Oregon game. So much bigger than just a Big Ten regular season game. I mean, while it is the biggest Big Ten regular season game that the Buckeyes have played outside of a few versions of the game over the last 10 years, maybe one or two Penn State games, this one's just enormous. And I want to take stock. I want to take stock of where the Buckeyes are at, where each position group is at versus where we thought it might be at this point in the season. Our expectations, have they lived up? Maybe not. So I want to go through all that stuff today. And I also want to remind you guys that tonight we are going to be on at 8:30, Sports Chat 503. I'm going to stream it on my channel as well. So just look out for my channel, 8:30 Eastern time with my buddy Ryan Winters. He does an Oregon show. So we're going to do a little Ohio State Oregon show. And the last time I was on with him, we had more Buckeyes in the chat than Oregon folks, which I was very proud of. The Juckeyes showed up in full force. So please do so again tonight at 8:30. Additionally, I've got some good news. So maybe I told you, or maybe I didn't. I've got 3 current internet service providers here at the house trying to fix this issue I've had. 2 of them don't have upload speeds big enough to be able to support the stream. The one that does is the one that keeps getting the intermittent interruptions. And I had the guy out today for the second time, along with a bunch of equipment that I bought along the process. And he says he believes that it is coming from the box outside into the house. That wire needs rerun underground. Now, this might take 10 days to get done, but he believes that's the problem. And that is now ordered. So hopefully that'll be fixed and we will be done with that forever, because it was not an issue for me at all for the first 6 months I was doing this when I'd go live. And then it just became an issue. So hopefully that's it, guys. I appreciate you bearing with me through these issues that I've had going live. But thankfully today we're not live. Well, right now we're not live. But we are going live pretty much every morning, which I've thoroughly enjoyed. It's been a whole lot of fun with you guys, and I appreciate you. But why don't we just get right down to it? The Ohio State Buckeyes in 2024 are the best team in college football. And I'm not going to be waiting until everybody else says that after they beat Oregon convincingly in Eugene, Oregon, which I believe they will. That's when all the talking heads are going to jump on this. It doesn't matter to me that they haven't played anybody. Everything that I've seen so far has only reinforced my belief, because I've been saying this since June. Ohio State was the best team in football before Tennessee lost to Arkansas, or Georgia lost to Alabama, or Alabama lost to Vandy. They've been the best team all along. They were the best team entering. They should have been the favorite for the national championship in the preseason. I've been saying that all along. They were second, barely. They nudged up to getting close. I think there was a point in time where one of the websites was MGM. MGM had Ohio State as the favorite for maybe like a week, and then it went back to Georgia. But they're the favorite now. And this has nothing to do with the chaos that we saw on Saturday. But last week, I did have a lot of people after the Michigan State game telling me that Ohio State would get smoked by Alabama or Georgia, maybe even Tennessee. And I'm not talking about trolls. I'm talking about Ohio State fans. And I have a theory about a certain portion of the Ohio State fan base. I think that there are a lot of people in the Ohio State fan base who are deeply scarred over some big losses. 2006, 2007, Florida LSU. I think that's one crew. 2000 or the 1990s Michigan games, like there's a certain crew that kind of grew up in that era. That's my crew that are kind of scarred by that. And then there's the crew that is kind of scarred by the SEC, the 2006, 2007, and that next maybe 10 years. Maybe like that was their formative years. I don't know, but I just talk to people who view these matchups against the SEC like Ohio State never matches up, and that's just not true. You look at the COVID year Alabama team, nobody was touching that team. 06, 07 Florida, there were issues, and they've been addressed. Ohio State does not recruit like they did back then. Things are different, way different. The last time Ohio State played the best in the SEC was a game that they pretty well outplayed a Georgia team wire to wire and ended up losing the game by a point. Yet for some reason, there's this feeling from a lot of folks that they just don't match up, and it's not true. And for the folks that feel that way and the reasons that they told me, like, I just want to let everybody know all these other teams, the Georgias, the Bamas, like, I'm a rather nosy fella. I snoop around other schools' boards all the time. I read their insiders, like all of them say the same stuff about their teams that we say about ours. There's always a couple groups that lag behind on the team, a couple position groups. There's always a couple position coaches that they don't like. They've all got a Justin Fry, who is the current whipping boy on the Ohio State staff. Like every fan base has that guy that all of a sudden everybody doesn't like. Every fan base has a coach who's making personnel decisions that the group of the fan base doesn't get along, like they don't like the personnel change that he's made or who's starting where. Like everybody has these little things. They all got their bugaboos, whether it's slow starts, too many penalties, third down conversion, whatever it is, they've all got them. And I think sometimes that our scarred portion of our fan base looks at the little itty bitty things that we got going on and thinks that Alabama and Georgia don't have these issues. They're going to smoke us. But there's a lot of Buckeye fans who do not believe that this Buckeye team can win the national championship. And it would be uncharted waters because we generally don't win the national championship when we feel like we're the best team, when we feel like we should be favored. At least I feel like we should be favored. We actually are favored now. Let me pull up the odds here. So we have the Buckeyes favored to win the national championship at plus 290. Texas and Georgia tied at 450. That's a pretty sizable difference. That is bigger than Georgia. That's bigger than Georgia was the number one ahead of us entering the season. Fourth place, Alabama at plus 650. Oregon at plus 900. After that, a massive drop-off. And these five teams, Ohio State, Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Oregon, are the five teams, despite what we've been through in the early chaos of this season, are the top five favorites preseason as well. Georgia was 1, Ohio State was 2, depending on where you looked. Oregon or Texas were 3 and 4, and Alabama was 5. So the order slightly reversed, but we're kind of right back to where we started. We're right back to where we started, with those five teams standing kind of heads and shoulders above the rest of college football. Penn State, who's currently ranked number 4, plus 1,800, so way down there. This is the week that the Buckeyes show everybody exactly who they are. And a lot of us found it to be very obvious that this Buckeye team, who they called the super team all offseason, was coming into the season as the favorite to win the national championship. And it's not because we're Ohio State fans. It's because we're Ohio State followers. I am. Most of you are. Some of you aren't. I appreciate you guys for watching who aren't Ohio State fans. This is going to mostly be a Buckeye show today, almost exclusively. So if you're looking for any of the national college football stuff, I'm just on the Bucks today. This is a big week for us, a really big week. But because we're Buckeye followers, we have the benefit of seeing the changes in the program that the outsiders would not have paid much attention to. We had the benefit of knowing before the rest of the country the ridiculous number one receiver that we had coming in. We had the benefit of knowing before the rest of the country everything that was going on with our new center and how much that changed our offensive line. We had the benefit of knowing what happened with Ryan Day and all the changes that happened with him and how he was approaching the team. We had the benefit of seeing just the different feel of this team, the tightness of this team. Things are different. It's very different. And most people that are national analysts, like they do that kind of research on all the teams they cover, all the top teams anyway. When they're breaking down like who the best teams are, yada, yada, yada. And I've just been kind of confused. Like, that's what I do anyway. Like, I know those top 5 teams, I know a lot about their rosters, past recruiting classes, position coaches. Like, looking at all these teams, it was very obvious to me that Ohio State should have been the number 1 team. The only difference, Georgia had Carson Beck. Carson Beck, supposed to be a much better quarterback than Will Howard. And if we're talking about NFL prospect, he is, for sure. But if we're talking about a college quarterback, a guy who's moving an offense and scoring points, he's not been that so far. Georgia with just 4 first-half touchdowns in their 4 Power 4 games. Granted, they played a much tougher schedule with Kentucky, Alabama, Clemson, and Auburn. So a tougher schedule for sure, no doubt. But this guy's supposed to be, he was a Heisman frontrunner heading into the season. You're the Heisman frontrunner heading into the season. I don't want to hear about your schedule. If you're not putting up the numbers and you're not moving the offense, then you've no longer provided your team that value that made you stand out above the other team who was essentially better in almost every position group than Georgia. Ohio State was. They had Ohio State at linebacker and offensive line. Ohio State had them everywhere else, every other group except for quarterback. So things go kind of wonky to start the season. We see some upsets, and entering week 6, right back to where we started with these 5 teams at the top. So I'm going to ask you, do you guys think that Texas can beat Ohio State? I don't. Penn State, number 5. Georgia. This Georgia team's different. They're different. I overrated them coming into the season. There's something off with this team. I don't fear them a bit. Tennessee, nope. Ole Miss, nope. Penn State, no. It's Oregon and Alabama. Those are the 2 teams that I think match up the best against the Buckeyes, and in different ways. Alabama, so dynamic with Milroe. A quarterback that can run like that and throw a deep ball like that with a dynamic receiver is just tough. But their defense is dreadful. Can the Buckeyes get more stops than they can stop the Buckeyes? I don't think so. I'd make the Buckeyes the favorite in a game against Alabama. We know they're the favorite in the game against Oregon. And we know they're the favorite now to win the national championship. But this Oregon game means so much. I think it means so much for them mentally. I mean, the guys on the team, the Buckeyes. Now, could they lose and maybe that makes things even better in the long run? I suppose. But I don't want that to happen. I want them to know that they can line up with anybody and beat them. And it's not just about that. You've got this team coming into the conference kind of with this attitude that they're going to slay the dinosaurs. Ohio State being the dinosaur, Michigan being the dinosaur. They're going to come in. They're the new thing. They're the hot thing. They're what the kids like. They're the swag. And they've been slowly building for the last 25 years to get to this point right here. Not only that, but they have spent the last couple of years trying to plant a recruiting flag in the Midwest. And Midwest recruiting starts right here in Ohio, and they've been successful. They've gone against Ohio State head-to-head. They've won a lot of battles. They have a great recruiting infrastructure. They have a great recruiting staff. They're young. They're cool. They're everything that the brand is. They fit it perfectly. And the young dudes love it. And there's going to be a lot of young dudes that are going to be at that game, including Naeem Offord, for one, committed to the Buckeyes, seriously considering Oregon and Auburn. It's so big for recruiting. It's so big to remind them, no, you're not here yet. There's still a top dog in this conference, and it ain't the team up north. And I think that there is a lot of the country, to be honest with you, that has a hard time recognizing that Ohio State can win a national championship under Ryan Day. Because for some reason, Ryan Day has James Franklin's reputation. I don't know why. They just can't see him being that guy. I think social media has seeped into professional pundits' consciousness. And Ohio State's a very hated brand, right? No doubt about that. The hate is out in full force on Ohio State. Michigan, for one, is the second biggest fan base in the country. So you got that. The entire SEC hates Ohio State. And to top it all off, Ohio State is in the mix every single year. And because of that, you create new enemies all the time. Missouri, who I don't really consider a traditional SEC team, they never used to hate Ohio State. They do now. Like, everybody hates Ohio State. Kind of like most of us outside of my pal Chris feel about the Yankees. You just love them or you hate them. And so much of that hate the last couple of years, combined with the albatross of a record against the SEC in the postseason that Ohio State has, that there is no way to shake or make excuses for. It is what it is. They just need to start changing it slowly but surely, one at a time. You take all that, you add it onto the consecutive losses against Michigan after the 2 decades of dominance from Urban and Tress. And for some reason, nobody believes that Ryan Day can actually have the best team in the country or get this done. They just don't see him being able to do it. They don't give him any respect. I talked yesterday with Chris about these national coaching rankings and how guys like Kalen DeBoer, Lance Leopold, Mike Norvell get more respect on a national level than Ryan Day, which is just insane to me. Coming out of week 6, you would think it's blatantly obvious to everybody that Ohio State's the best team in the country, but it's not. It's still not. They came out, you know what they said? I don't think we got a dominant team this year. Look at Alabama, look at Georgia, look at I don't think there's a dominant team. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? It's plain as day who the dominant team is. Will they change their tune next week should Ohio State win by, let's say, 2 touchdowns? Will they even change their tune then? If you were an objective analyst, you would look at this Ohio State team and say, this team has all the makings of your traditional national championship team. They've just got a blind spot to it. They've got a ton of veterans. They play great defense. They can run the ball. They're good in the trenches. They've got 3 clear NFL starters on the offensive line. They have 3 first or second rounders on the defensive line. They're all playing well. They don't depend on throwing the ball around the yard. But when they need to, they have the best wide receivers in the country to help their quarterback, who's a veteran, a great leader, big, strong, runs fast, makes mistakes, quickly brushes them off, and goes back to work. They have an elite secondary. They have the best running backs in the game. They have the it factor. They have it in spades. They all like each other. They got Chip Kelly calling plays. Like, everything about this team has check, 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 check. This coaching staff for this Buckeye team, like every athletic director, if you gave him truth serum in the country, would probably trade his coaching staff for what's right now in Columbus, outside of 1, maybe 2 in the entire country. And every one of those people who run around saying Ohio State hasn't played anybody, if they were forced to watch every Ohio State game, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Oregon, Ole Miss, Penn State, watch them all and then choose, you got to bet your car on one of those teams to win the national championship. Ohio State is the team they would put their money on. Much more of them than somebody else, for sure. I've watched them all. I try to be as unbiased as I can be. And even with a little bias, I'll admit I have. It's plain as day, dude. There is no complete team like those Buckeyes. And everybody admits that they've got elite players at every position, too. So you got elite players and you got them playing well and playing together. Like, what is the question here? It's absurd to me. But there's no great teams this year. So the Bucks intend to prove it October 12th in Eugene, Oregon, one of the toughest places to play in the country. And I don't mean to dismiss Oregon at all. This is not the Oregon that came out clunky against Idaho, against Boise State, who we now know is a pretty damn good team, who got ran over by a kid named Ashton Genty, who at the time, that didn't mean a ton. It sure means a lot now. He's the front runner for the Heisman. We've seen that Oregon team grow every single week, just like we've seen the Ohio State team grow together every single week and get better every week. For the Buckeyes team, we've seen some great revelations, a few disappointments, and being that we just completed the Iowa game, I want to take stock. Where are the Buckeyes now 5 games into the season? Let's go through position group by position group and see where we think we are. How's each group done in the first 5 games? Are there any surprises, good or bad? Players, coaching decisions? Are they living up to the expectations that we had for them? We'll start on defense. My opinion, heading into the season, was this was the best defense in the country in 2024. You had what I believe was the top defensive line in the country when you factor in both starters and ready-to-play depth, 1 to 8. And what is that? What the ready-to-play depth, to me, is everything. Let's take a team like Michigan, for instance. You got the 2 big boys in the middle. That's great. When they come out, you run all over them. Not like that at Ohio State. Even though outside of Caden McDonald, the interior hasn't played great, the 2 deep. But guys like Hero Kanu, Taiwan Malone, even though they haven't played up to that standard, they've still played pretty well. And the difference between Ohio State and the top SEC teams that Ohio State has gone against and struggled with, dating all the way back to 2006 with Florida, with LSU, is they had that 1 through 8 on the defensive line. Ohio State didn't. And that difference was big late in the game. It was huge. They could just keep running in the bigs, and eventually they'd wear us out. It was very evident that that was an area that needed to be improved upon. And props to Ryan Day and crew. They've absolutely done it. Obviously, you get Jack, Tyleek, JT back. That's huge. But they got it this year. They absolutely got it this year, the best defensive line. How about the secondary? You bring in Caleb Downs. You got Denzel Burke coming back. IGB on the rise. Lathan Ransom, an underappreciated stud. His absence last year, that injury, man, that really hurt the defense. The top secondary in the country. That's what I thought it would be. And I don't think that either of those predictions were outlandish. Phil Steele thought the same thing, for instance. And most of the prediction magazines and predictors that do that kind of stuff had the Ohio State defensive line and secondary ranked either 1, 2, or 3. Every single one. The linebacker group was the big question. You lost your 2 starters in Steele and Tommy. To many, that was a good thing. A lot of people couldn't stand the lack of athleticism from the linebacker position. You returned Cody Simon, who played 370 snaps last year, a captain, a senior veteran. You moved Sonny Styles to what everybody said was his natural position at linebacker, and he and CJ Hicks were going to compete for the will spot next to Cody at Mike. Most likely, both of them were going to play a whole lot. We didn't even really care who the starter was, and I think the majority of us thought they would both play very good. We were told CJ Hicks was getting it right off the rip against lesser competition, we figured we would see them both playing very well, and linebacker would continually get better. So as a whole, my expectations were that this defense that ranked top 3 in the country in almost every metric last year would be even better this year. You added Caleb Downs at safety. Who'd you lose? You lost Mike Hall. You lost 2 linebackers that you potentially upgraded with, right? Should be better against Iowa. Toughest competition of the season so far. A near perfect performance with a few hugely important confidence building showings. The linebackers had their best test to date. Now, granted, a much different test than they're going to face this week in Oregon, but they passed the toughest one to date with flying colors. And the linebacker group has been up and down. Very good against Iowa. Let's start with Sonny. I've been very critical of Sonny's performance against Marshall, against Michigan State. I've been more critical of the staff for playing Sonny so much more than Arvell, who, quite frankly, is just further along in his development. Sonny played his best game as a Buckeye against Iowa, flat out. And I want to spend a second on this because I think that this linebacker group is so important to how this defense performs as a whole. So much is dependent on these guys. So Sonny was tremendous. 1 pressure, 1 quarterback hit, pile of tackles, missed just 1 tackle, which was considerably better than the last couple of games. He was targeted 5 times in coverage. They completed 4 balls against him, but for just 19 yards. So they complete it. He is immediately bringing him to the ground. Also had the best PFF grade that he has had the entire year. He was top 5 on the team. And all of this, it could not have come at a better time. He outplayed Cody and he outplayed Arvell. The Buckeyes were in the 4-3 about 70% of the game. That puts Sonny at the Sam instead of the normal Will. In the base defense, he's the Will next to Cody, who's the Mike. You go to the 4-3, he moves to the Sam. Cody moves to the Will. Arvell comes in at Mike. That's a bit of a cluster. Not ideal. But they did it for about 30 snaps the other day, and Arvell played 30 snaps at Mike. Jordan Hancock only played 17 snaps. That's how much they were in the 4-3. So this Iowa game with Sonny at Sam was a much more natural fit for Sonny. He's playing way better at that Sam role than he is at the Mike. Or I'm sorry, at the Will. What's that tell us? He has more responsibilities at the Will, for one. There's only 2 linebackers instead of 3. He's also closer to the line at the Sam, which we all agree. We think he'd be really good at that with his frame, with his body. He doesn't have to think as much. He doesn't have to just react, be an athlete. And he was noticeably faster, right? I think everybody said that coming out of the game. Gosh, he looks so much faster. And I've had a lot of folks commenting throughout Sonny's performances that Sonny looks way slower than they thought he would be. And Sonny is not a slow man. You can see his testing numbers. He's a very fast man. He's just a step late. There's a difference between being late and being slow. He's not processing his responsibility as fast as you would want him to because he hasn't had a ton of reps at linebacker. And he could do that better at Sam. He's had more issues than just that. He's had issues getting off blocks and some other things, missed tackles. But that to me is the primary issue. And you can get better at that by mental reps, by reps on the field, by a lot of different ways. And for a lot of people, this is their argument of why he should continue to play a ton of snaps. My argument is that you've got a guy who has maybe a higher ceiling, who also should be getting those same reps. He can also continue to improve and be developed, right? I want to see them both develop, because what you might have is a guy behind him right now with the ceiling of an NFL second-round pick. And you want to develop both of these guys at the same rate. Plus, the guy behind him is playing better. So should you say go into a big game like a game against Oregon, who do you want playing more snaps? That you want the 2 best right now, or you want to worry about developing the guy? You know what I mean? And that's just a difference in philosophy. And I do want to make this clear because some people have said in the comments, I called for benching Sonny. Never, ever said that. Said I want to see the same amount of snaps or more for Arvell. That's not benching, not at all. And I've always said I believe Sonny will get it, and I do believe he will. But Oregon, in my opinion, is a tougher matchup. It's a much tougher matchup. They're going to throw a lot of short passes. I don't know if they're going to try to force Ohio State in the 4-3 a lot. I don't know if they're going to notice on the film that maybe the 4-2 might be better for them. I haven't really studied how often they get into 12 personnel with 2 tight ends. And I don't know how much looking at what their tendencies are really going to help, because I think whatever their tendencies are isn't going to matter. Like, I expect both Oregon and Ohio State to be throwing every wrinkle and trying to break any kind of tendency that they normally have against the other. Like, this is going to be Will Stein is Oregon's offensive coordinator. The dude's really, really good, I think. And you think of yourself as a young offensive coordinator who's very well respected and coming up, and you're going to play a game opposite Chip Kelly. Like, this is the ultimate measuring stick for this kid, right? I call him a kid. That's rude. He's not a kid, but he's much, much younger than Chip Kelly. And Chip Kelly, who, by the by, used to coach Oregon, like, this is a huge game for this guy, right? A lot of pressure. And he is absolutely going to want to show off. This is a confident dude. He's going to want to show what he's got against Chip Kelly, man. So I expect to see a lot of interesting stuff from Oregon. But what we do know is they throw a lot of short passes, a whole lot of short passes, and they run the ball really hard. Jordan James looked great. And they were running it right at Michigan State. I mean, downhill, right down the pipe. And to be honest, that's where we've had some issues. So that's going to be the biggest test of this game right there. Because all Ohio State needs to do, in my opinion, against Oregon is get a couple of more stops, but they're going to score. They're going to score plenty. I think this will be a high-scoring game, and Ohio State just needs to get more stops. And a lot of that is going to be contingent upon these linebackers. This is going to be great, man. This is such a great test for Sonny, for Arvell, for Cody. We're really going to see what they're made of. You can also get the kind of death by 1,000 cuts from Oregon too with these short passes, man. The kind that just absolutely drive you insane, where it seems like every time a team's in 3rd and 6, they hit the tight end on a little crosser over the middle. You know what I mean? This feels like one of those games to me. And that's why I think it'll be high scoring. I think both teams are going to just first down after first down, and stops are going to be at a premium, an absolute premium. All right, let's go to defensive line. And not coincidentally, the 2 worst performances by the linebackers were against Marshall and against Michigan State, the 2 games that Tyleek didn't play. And it shouldn't be any surprise. Tyleek, predicted by just about every one of the draft guys to be the number 1 guy taken out of this draft class coming up from Ohio State. He's a total stud. He's a dominant force. And it's not just those linebackers that play better with him in there. Ty Hamilton right next to him is a totally different player when Tyleek's in there. They're a dominant force together. Absolutely dominant. A couple of the best interior guys in the country, that's for sure. And Tyleek just makes the whole defense better. Every single level. So Tyleek, he's back. He's playing great. Jack was fantastic against Iowa. The player of the game for me, for sure. And Ty Hamilton was also awesome against Iowa. Both of those 2 guys have played great all year. JT, I think, has played really good in the run game this year. The interior, 2 deep. Jason Moore has played a little bit, and that's a guy that we thought in spring we might see some more of. We might maybe even have a breakout year, and it's clear that he's not ready. He's not there yet. But Caden McDonald was a huge surprise. That's somebody that we weren't expecting to break out and look all of a sudden like this guy could potentially be, all Big Ten, maybe even all American at some point in his career. He has a lot of Tyreek in him, and he's got a motor. And it's funny because they're kind of built a little similarly. Caden maybe a little chunkier, and these guys just go for days, and they're so quick for their size. It's pretty wild. But a huge revelation with him, and maybe somewhat to the negative side, Hero Canoe, not as far along as I think a lot of us thought in spring, in fall. I expected more out of Hero in the couple of times that we saw him play so far in extended minutes. He played in extended minutes against Marshall, start of the game, and wasn't great. Wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. It wasn't as far along as I thought. After that big performance against Wisconsin last year, when it looked like, okay, this year he's going to really probably make a big step. And a little disappointing there. But, I have faith that he's going to be really good. Taiwan Malone, another surprise guy, though. We weren't expecting anything out of him. None of us except for Dylan Davis, maybe. He's been calling that for a long time. Ty Malone played really good against Marshall, and against Michigan State, not quite as good. So we've got one game really good, one game not quite so good. We don't quite know what we have in Ty Malone, but I think the future looks bright. I don't think we'll see much of him out of this year. Kenyatta and Caden Curry as your two deep on the ends. Great. You couldn't ask for better. They would be starting at a lot of places. And there you go. You got your 8 deep at the offensive line. They're all looking as good as we hoped that they would, I think, right? Give or take one guy here, one guy there, flip-flop. I thought it would be Hero, and it's not. It's Caden McDonald, who's that dominant 3-man. And all's well. The unit looks fantastic. They are altering the way defenses play or the way offenses play. They're totally like, you can be disruptive in a couple of ways. If the opponent changes their entire game plan on offense to get the ball out of their hands really fast, then that defensive line has already done 50% of the disrupting, because you've altered what they wanted to do to make them get the ball out fast so they don't have to deal with you. That in itself is being very, very disruptive, right? I think so. So no, we've not seen a lot of sacks. We have seen a lot of hurries. We have seen some pressures. We've had some strips, right? We saw 2 strips last game from Ty, from Jack. They're doing really good. They're playing really good as a unit. We've not seen the sacks yet. We will. There's going to be teams coming up and teams in the playoffs. They're definitely going to test that defensive line. They're going to have to. And we'll see it. We'll see it for sure. But these teams we've played that have been so outmatched, they're getting that ball out in 2.4 seconds, which, by the way, is the same thing that Will Stein tries to do. They want that ball out of his hand fast. So I don't expect to see much different in that department against Oregon either. Now, the secondary, Lathan, Caleb at safety, they've been outstanding. In run support, they've been good and pretty damn good in coverage as well. Denzel's that dude. IGB, who is rising at the end of last year. A lot of us thought that this year he's going to maybe work his way, maybe even into the first round. And he had one rough game and a few really good games against Iowa, his most recent game, a very good game. It was a get-right game for IGB, who did not play so great against Michigan State. And it also highlighted his physicality. They showed him on the broadcast several times. He is so obnoxious to wide receivers. He's just annoying. He's a gnat. He's got hands on him all the time. He must be so obnoxious to go against. He's got a big mouth. Like, that dude takes guys off their game. And while he's not been perfect so far this season, that is a fantastic number 2 corner. Like, fantastic. Now, Jermaine Matthews. I thought that Jermaine Matthews was someone who might be at this point getting a little more playing time. We've not seen a ton of snaps for Jermaine, but I think the staff's got full confidence in Jermaine that he is an absolutely excellent coverage corner. In the run game, where IGB is really good, Jermaine's not been so good. He's just not that big or not that physical. I watched him go in and basically get on all fours to make a cut tackle against Michigan State, and it was just like, what are you doing, bud? Like, But dude's going to be a hell of a cornerback. And if something should happen, or if IGB is, having a bad game at some point, like Jermaine's a great option. And he's only going to get better. So the secondary, looking great. Now, the defense as a whole, I don't take into account yet, because they've only played 2 Big Ten teams, things like, well, they are averaging, the fewest points per game. Like, that doesn't mean much to me until you've played as many Big Ten teams or Power 5 teams as you have, the Group of 5 teams. Right now, you've still played 3 Group of 5 teams and just 2 Power 5 teams. So until you try to, until you filter them out a little bit, those kind of numbers don't mean as much to me. But, you can just watch them and see what they got going on. Everything is looking really well. They're right where I think that we wanted them to be, at least in my opinion. The linebacker position, still a bit of a question mark, but we see the trajectory it's on, and it's on a really good trajectory, because even if Sonny doesn't end up coming along as fast as you need him to, Arvell is in the 4-2. In the 4-3, Sonny looks like he's got it down in spades. So I think the defense looks fantastic. Now, on the offense, let's go to offensive line. What do we think about offensive line? Well, we had a returning left side of the offensive line that is 2 NFL players in Donovan Jackson and Josh Simmons. So we knew that was going to be good. But even with those 2 guys last year, it wasn't a very good performing offensive line, because you had a sophomore or second-year guy in Carson Hinsman at center who just didn't play good. You bring in Seth McLaughlin, a guy who was all SEC 2 years ago. I wasn't particularly high on him. I thought, okay, that's a solid guy to stick in there. Sounds good. You got a battle at right guard that we thought was either Luke Montgomery or maybe Carson or maybe Tegra. And out of nowhere, it's now Tegra Carson or Tegra Austin Searveld. Now it looks like Tegra's settled in and he's going to be the starter moving forward, I think. And then you got Josh Pryor. I think that the Josh Pryor has improved narrative was maybe a little overblown, though he does look improved. But ultimately, Donovan Jackson's playing way better than he did last year. So is Josh Simmons. And Seth McLaughlin is not the center that I thought he was. Seth McLaughlin is a guy who just might be a Remington Trophy finalist. That's how good this guy's playing. And the difference he's made in this offensive line, along with, yes, the difference Justin Fry has made in the development of these guys from last year to this year. And you can't overlook Tegra's development, and you can't overlook Austin Searveld's development. Now, a lot of how these guys are playing as a unit, that credit goes to Chip. But the individual development of each of these guys, that goes to Justin Fry. And props to him for that. All in all, I thought this would be a top 10 offensive line. Now I think this has the capability of being a top 4, top 3 offensive line in the country. They look tremendous. They look athletic. The only thing I really worry about is Josh Fryer against elite edge rushers. Other than that, I feel 100% certain that this offensive line can take this team down to score against any defense in the country. They got their hands full this week, against Oregon. Derek Harmon in the middle is a moose. Birch on the edge, one of the best in the country. And it's going to be a huge test. And let's also realize that when we talk about the SEC and the defensive lines in the SEC, Georgia and Alabama, they don't have the classic freaky defensive lines. There are no Will Andersons right now. There are no superstars on those 2 teams that are absolute game wreckers. There just aren't. This Ohio State offensive line, if it can block Iowa well, successfully, and Oregon and Michigan, then it's going to hold up against those 2 as well. So we're going to be able to see before they enter the playoffs how these guys are going to look, I think, versus the playoff teams that we're going to play. Also, Texas lost their 2 big beasts in the middle as well. So when we look at the matchups further down the road, we're going to get tested. These guys are going to get tested before they make it to those matchups. And we're going to have a pretty good idea of what we're going to see. And this Oregon one is going to be a hell of a test. The running back room, we thought we knew what it was. And yes, we know what it is. Not even worth taking a second thought. The tight ends. During fall camp, I decided that this was the group I was the most concerned about. Formerly the offensive line, I switched it to tight end. And, you know, if there's going to be one group, there's always going to be one group that straggles behind on your team. There's always a first, there's always a last. I think tight end is last, and that's okay. You don't need a lot out of the tight ends. If you're going to pick one, you would make it tight ends. I don't understand what's going on with Jelani. It looked like he was on the progression that we had all hoped. 20 snaps, 20 snaps, 20 snaps, and then he falls off the face of the earth for Michigan State and Iowa. Why? Don't know. He had just played a very good game the game before at Marshall, against Marshall. So I don't know what that's about. We saw those snaps go to G. G is what he is. He's not going to become a better blocker anymore. Like, he's now maxed out. This is who he is. He's going to miss some blocking assignments. Will Kazmarek is not the guy that I was hoping he would be, right? Bennett Christian's a really good blocker. I think that what you've got is a serviceable tight end room. Now, they don't stick out. They do stick out. They stick out as less talented than everybody else on the offense. That's how they stick out. But they don't need to do a ton. They just need to be consistent, and they need to be better blockers. And we've seen them make really good blocks. We've also seen them screw some things up. Everybody has. The point is, they just need to be consistent. If they only screw up a couple plays a game, whatever. Everybody's going to screw up here and there. You don't need to rely on them for the passing game, but you know that G can catch the ball if he needs to. And all in all, if they never even get Jelani involved in this offense, I think they should. I think it's an added extra weapon. But if they never do, is it going to prohibit this offense from reaching the highest heights that they can reach? I don't think it will. And that takes us to quarterback. And what were your expectations for Will Howard? Let's wait for Will Howard. Wide receivers. We thought that we were going to be the first or second best wide receiver room in the country. I did an episode of Oregon and Ohio State breaking down each position group, whose was better. And pretty much every ranking magazine and ranking that does the position group deal had Ohio State and Oregon as 1 and 2. Most had Ohio State as number 2. Oregon was number 1. And I conceded in that episode that Oregon, at the time I did it, was in fact number 1. But by the time Ohio State and Oregon played, Ohio State would be number 1 because Jeremiah Smith would have shown the country that not only did he earn a starting role, but that he's one of the best wide receivers in the country. And I wasn't right about it. Jeremiah was right. I can't take credit for it. But yes, Ohio State now has the best wide receiver room in the country. They're ultra productive. They're playing great, and they are actually playing way better than we ever thought they would because of the blocking that we've seen out of them. And that's what you need, and something that we didn't even factor in when we thought about Will Howard. We didn't even factor in that if you can get these guys blocking and playing physical, big body dudes, JJ, Emeka, Carnell Tate, get them aggressive and get them playing like that, how much better a guy like Will, who all you're asking to do is be a facilitator of the offense and not make bonehead plays, not turn it over, take the occasional shot, hit the occasional back shoulder throw to Emeka, which was gorgeous, and take the small stuff. Run it when you need to. Will's been fantastic. He's been everything I wanted to see and more. I think Ryan Day absolutely made the right decision. I think Chip Kelly has done an excellent job building this offense in a way that Will can work it perfectly. You got the big brain guys on this, man, and they've done phenomenal. Will's done phenomenal. When he makes a mistake, it's like it doesn't even faze him. He's not a mental midget. The dude's great. He's great. All you hope is that he doesn't have those one or two brain farts. Let me put it this way. I guess all I'm hoping is that the one or two brain farts end up in the result like we had in Michigan State, where the DB didn't catch the ball instead of the other one where they did, right? It's like he just can't stop himself from having one or two. And will that ever change? I don't know. But is this guy good enough to take this offense down to score 40 points on every defense that we play? I think he is. And that's a recipe to win. So the game against Oregon. This offense against that Oregon defense, I give the edge to the Ohio State offense. The Oregon offense against the Ohio State defense, I give the edge to the Ohio State defense. I think that Ohio State is going to score somewhere around 35 points against Oregon. And I think that Oregon is going to score somewhere around 21 to 24 points against Ohio State. That's what I'm seeing on Tuesday. Now, I may change. I'm going to reserve the right to change based on talking to a couple of the Oregon guys this week. I'll make my final prediction on Friday, but that's how I'm feeling right now. Curious to know what you guys think. And I just wanted to kind of go down a little trip down. All right, where did we start with these position groups and where are we at now? Because this game is so consequential, and what we're about to see is going to really tell us so much about all these beliefs that we've had. Are you worried about traveling out to Oregon? Stat came out this week. So since the new teams have entered the Big Ten, teams that have traveled across 2 time zones so far in the Big Ten are 1-7. Scary stat. So I went through and I looked at each game. And then I went through and I wrote down, okay, who was the favorite in the game? So let's go through those games. You had Michigan going to Washington. Michigan was the underdog, and they lost. You had Wisconsin going out to USC. Wisconsin was the underdog, and they lost. You had Michigan State going out to Oregon. Michigan State was the underdog, and they lost. You had UCLA going to Penn State. UCLA was the underdog, and they lost. You had Washington going to Rutgers. Washington was the underdog, and they lost. You had Indiana going to UCLA. Indiana was the favorite, and they won. Just 2 teams were the favorite and lost to their opponent traveling 2 time zones. And both of those teams were coached by Lincoln Riley. They're both named USC. They lost to Michigan and Minnesota as the favorites. So rather than a travel issue, this just might be a Lincoln Riley issue. I'm not worried about it. In recruiting news, I talked to Brady Edmonds. Brady Edmonds had a great visit. It was much more than he ever expected. And he has already visited UCLA. He is going to USC this weekend for Penn State. And then he is scheduling with Michigan and Texas sometime this year. So the USC Penn State one might be a banger. I really hope Penn State mollywops him because I don't want him getting any kind of feeling about USC. But it's looking good. It's looking good. But I do think that the recruiting guys who thought that Brady Edmonds might be committing to Ohio State soon, which they've been saying that for 3 weeks or so, not the case. Not the case at all. And then I got my hopes up a little bit earlier as Mario Nash, who is a lineman out of Mississippi, listen, I love Mario Nash, really good lineman, but Mario Nash is teammates with Demarius Yates, who is a 2026 running back, the top 5 running back in the country. Carlos Lachlan has offered him. They came up to visit together over the summer. Now, we do need a lineman in the class of 2025. Mario Nash is a 2025 lineman. So he decommits from Mississippi State, and which was a surprise commitment to Mississippi State. Like surprise commitment. Now he's done. He decommits. And I see this today, and I got a hold of him because I had talked to him when he was coming up for those visits. And I asked him, has Ohio State reached out? Because I was fingers crossed that this had something to do with us. No such luck. it's Florida State. He's going to flip to Florida State. So there we go. I was all excited for a second. What in the hell could interest you in Florida State at this point? I have no idea, but we're missing out on one there because Mario Nash is pretty damn good. So that's what we got on that. Have you guys seen, oh my gosh, did I show you this picture of, did I show you this with Chris? That's Mason Graham heading out to Washington. It's a bad day to be a Husky. I love that picture. In Florida State, they flashed this on the screen. Oh, let me pull that banner down. They flashed this on the screen. What's at stake for Florida State with a win? Restores hope and respect. Ouch. That hurts. As you can imagine, the Bammers are not happy at all with Kalen DeBoer. And one of those Bammers, one of my favorites, longtime Paul Feinbaum caller, legend, had a little something to say that I would like to share with you guys. And I think we should just listen to it together and enjoy. Here's a little snippet from Legend's call today.
This is equivalent to coming home and finding your wife in bed with the neighbor. This is what this is equivalent to, Paul. And I'll say this for this. Me and K-Dub both agree. You could never trust her again. You might stay with her for the kid's sake, but you could never trust the woman again. And the same thing's true with Coach DeBoer. You can win a natty. We can't trust your ass now. You just proved that you can beat the best and lose to the worst in a 2-week friggin' period. You don't lose to Vanderbilt. That's the ugliest little sister on the block. You don't lose to Vanderbilt. You just don't friggin' do it, dude. And let me say this about Malachi Moore. I wish you'd have kicked it through the upright. I got your back, Malachi. Everybody putting you down. That's a shame. At least somebody's got some fire. At least somebody got upset about it. I didn't see much fire out there. I didn't see much folks getting upset. At least, Malachi, I wish you'd have kicked it up in the damn coach's booth and knock our sorry-ass defensive coordinator out. That's what I wish he had done. What the hell are you doing, Womack?
All right, so that's our guy Legend, absolutely eviscerating Kalen DeBoer and Kane Womack, the defensive coordinator. And if you didn't catch what he was talking about when he was talking about Malachi Moore saying, I wish you'd have kicked it through the uprights, this is what Malachi Moore did towards the end of the game. First, he slammed Diego Pavia's head into the ground. Then he threw his mouthpiece. They told him to come off the field, tried to send a substitute in. The defensive coordinator did. He wouldn't come off the field. Said, no, I'm not coming off the field. They said, okay. The sub went out. He didn't come off the field. And then at the end of the game, he kicked the ball. Watch this. So there he is slamming Diego's head into the ground. Let's watch that one more time so you can kind of see. He smacks his head, boom, right into the ground. Then in the next cut, he takes his mouthpiece out and throws it. And you can see how fired up he is, which I absolutely love. He seems to be the only guy that's really, like, I agree with Legend totally. If this was Ohio State, I would want to see Lathan Ransom freaking out. This right here, this is super childish. He goes up and kicks the ball like a little girl, but not listening to your coach when he tells you to come out of the game is a really bad sign. That's just not a good look. Do you remember when Terrelle Pryor chose Ohio State over Penn State, Michigan? In fact, Oregon was his number 4 school. Terrelle Pryor said that Penn State was too country. And then was it Terrell's freshman year or his sophomore year? Ohio State went to Penn State and lost. And the big Penn State meme was Terrell on the bench at that game crying or with his head in his hands with the caption "too country," because Terrell had said he didn't like it at Penn State. It was too country. I think Terrelle Pryor was right. Now, I've never been to State College, but James Franklin was describing the trip that they have to take out to USC. They're flying out of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, instead of the airport in State College, Pennsylvania. And he explains the reason why they have to do that.
size of plane, weight of plane, fuel on plane. We can't get out of here unless we would stop for fuel. Based on these schools, but based on runway length, size of plane, weight of plane, fuel on plane, we can't get out of here unless we would stop for fuel. So with that, we got to fly out of Harrisburg. So to me, that's one of the things I think we have to discuss is increasing the size of the runway.
Can you imagine you're a football coach and you got to deal with things like this? The length of the runway, because you can't get the plane with enough fuel and big enough for your football team to fly across the country. So now they got to drive to Harrisburg, fly out of Harrisburg. They're going on Thursday out to USC. It's going to take them 5.5 hours on the plane, probably 3 hours to get everything together, to get everybody to Harrisburg to board the plane. That's 8.5 hours, a couple hours to get settled in. You've got a whole damn day of just travel to get Penn State, the football program, to USC to play the football game. Well, Friday they'll do a walkthrough, and then Saturday they play the game. But I didn't really think about this much. I thought about smaller schools or schools like Cal going all the way to the East Coast to play Wake Forest, things like that. But Penn State to USC, pretty damn far. And that seems like a superb pain in the keister. So something to pay attention to as we talk about this record. Now, I haven't seen the line yet. I guess we could look it up right now. The Penn State USC line, because that's a game, guys. Listen, 2 weeks ago, if we talked about that game, we would have been singing a totally different tune. Penn State would have been the underdog. And I was thinking Penn State would probably lose that game. And now Penn State's ranked number 4 in the country, but I feel like it's a bit of a fraudulent 4. As we talked about the odds, they're just, I don't think they're that good. I don't think they're a top 4 team in the country. Do you? I'd really like to know. I'm having a hard time getting a read on Penn State. I feel like I'm more familiar with most of those other teams in the top 10 than I am Penn State. And I don't think I'm going to know who they are, honestly, until we play them, which kind of sucks. But why don't we just kind of take a quick jaunt through any interesting lines we see right now? For the games next week, you've got the South Carolina-Alabama game, and that's going to be at Alabama. Alabama, a 21.5 point favorite. By the way, guys, might as well go through last week's picks. Last week's Juckonbucks picks, we had Oregon minus 24.5. That was a loser. Syracuse plus 6.5. That was a winner. Texas A&M minus 2.5. That was a winner. SMU plus 6.5. That was a winner. Auburn plus 22. That was a winner. South Carolina plus 9. That was a loser. Ole Miss whooped them. Indiana minus 21. That was a winner. Clemson minus 24.5. That was a winner. Rutgers plus 6.5. That was a loser. Arkansas plus 14. That was a winner. Michigan plus 1.5. That was a loser. And Miami minus 10. That was an absolute loser. So we have got wins 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wins, 4 losses. That is plus 3 puts us at plus 7 on the year. We're killing it. We're killing it, guys. Plus 7 on the year. Okay, Washington and Iowa. That's a pretty close one. So that game will be at Iowa, and that is Iowa minus 2.5. Texas, Oklahoma. The Red River Shootout is going to be Texas minus 14.5. They're coming in at number 1, Oklahoma number 18. And that'll be, that's always an afternoon game. Oh, that's a 3:30 game. And then the Buckeyes currently on FanDuel, a 3.5-point favorite. Oh my gosh. I just totally forgot, guys, that we, not FanDuel. Who cares about them? It's all about my bookie. As the Juckster signed it. We just got re-upped with my bookie yesterday. I'll have my first ad read tomorrow. But I just want to let you know that I don't look at FanDuel. I always look at my bookie for the odds, because my bookie is obviously the best sports book there is. So tomorrow I'll tell you guys all about it with your new promo code. It'll be Juck something, and you're going to get some free money, and we'll talk about it then. But let me finish up here with the odds. So Bucks 3.5 on this inferior apps lines. Anything else interesting? Anything else tickle our fancy? Penn State. Penn State minus 4.5 at USC. That's pretty interesting. LSU Ole Miss. LSU number 9, Ole Miss number 13. That game is going to be an LSU night game, and LSU is a 3.5-point underdog at night in Death Valley. That's going to be a popular bet, and I'm still leaning Ole Miss. They can all be fools and take that LSU at home, thinking that that's going to make all the difference. This LSU team is no good. I just don't believe in it at all. Tennessee, Florida. Tennessee is a 14.5-point favorite at home. Tennessee dropped to number 8. Iowa State, West Virginia, a pretty big one in the Big 12. Iowa State at West Virginia. Iowa State, a 3.5-point favorite. Nebraska, Indiana, guys. Indiana at home is a 3.5-point favorite over Nebraska. How cool is that? Like, what in the world? What if we talked about that at the beginning of the season? As high as everybody was on Nebraska's potential to come into Ohio State at 7-0. I went through their games and kind of said, okay, well, they're going to be a favorite in this many of these games. And Indiana was one of the ones I was counting on them being a favorite. And the Texas and Georgia line is essentially straight up pick 'em. Texas is a 2.5-point favorite. So on a neutral field, they're saying that's essentially a pick 'em. Oh, that's the October 19th. That's next week's line. So they already got October 19th. They got 3 lines out for October 19th. They got Georgia, Texas. Texas is a 2.5-point favorite. Then they got Tennessee at Alabama. Tennessee is a 2.5-point home dog. And you got to wonder, Tennessee, which has had struggles on offense, Alabama's had struggles on defense, but Tennessee's defense has been stellar. Alabama's offense has been stellar. That's going to be a great game. Then you got Clemson and Miami. Clemson. Wow, Miami's a 1.5-point favorite, guys. I'd put the farm on Clemson right now. I just think that they're starting to build positive momentum in Clemson. I'm sorry, Miami on the way down. So, all right, guys, that's our show today. I appreciate y'all so much. Don't forget, set the alarm bells. Please like the video, and check me out with Ryan later on, and I will talk to you then. 8:30 tonight, 8:30 Eastern time, whatever 30 that is, Western Pacific Standard Time. All right, talk to you then. Juckonbucks out.